Mr. Draper, in this book, you asked the question, could a black kid from South Central Los Angeles be the photographer for the President of the United States? What's the answer to that question?
That's a big yes.
How'd you get the job?
Well, back in 2000, I was assigned by the Associated Press to cover the Bush campaign because I was a staff photographer, and that's my background is photojournalism. And so I covered the campaign full time for 18 months nearly.
Did you get to know the president in that? Did you get to know the president in that kind of work?
You do. I mean, you spend a lot of time on the road, mostly with other journalists, and a lot of time with the staff, the campaign staff, and I really didn't think about the job until actually after the election, because you might remember the election wasn't decided that night, and during the recount, well, that gave me the opportunity to pursue the position if Governor Bush had won the election, and everything lined up. It was perfect timing for me because right after he became president-elect, I had the opportunity to ask him in person, and I actually took a page out of his political playbook, because he would always say during the campaign, it must have been echoing in my head still at that point, that I'm going to look you in the eye and ask you for the job. I want to be your president. And so that's what I did at this party right after he became president-elect.
And what was his answer?
Well, he kind of looked at me, and it was the longest handshake ever for me. And he looked at me like he never thought about it before, and he said, "I really appreciate that, and I'll get back to you." And a week later, I received a call from the Chief of Staff's office for an interview back in Austin, and it all happened very quickly.
How many years did you spend with President Bush?
Well, if you count my time with him as a journalist, nearly 10 years.
So you were at the White House for 8 years with him.
Mm-hmm.
How many photos did you take altogether?
Well, I did a count because we had a digital system at the time, and I typed in my name to see how many hits would come up, and it came around to nearly 1 million images under my name, and that's everything. That's outtakes, out of focus photos of my feet, So, but yeah.
Eric Draper, you have a triptych in here from atop the Oval Office. How did you get from up top in the Oval Office?
I mounted a camera on the top of the Oval Office, and there's like a little ledge that lines the very top of the Oval Office where the fluorescent lights are, and there's just enough room for a camera. And so what I did was I mounted a digital camera and left it up there all day to show the sequence of events from the entire day, from the very moments when President Bush would walk into the Oval Office, through all of his meetings, and so that sequence shows his morning meetings, and then there's one image showing what it looks like when the Oval Office is full of media, just to show you how many people can fit into the Oval Office.
How long were your days?
It varied. It could go, definitely nothing shorter than 8 hours. I mean, either 12 hours or 16 hours, and then a lot of my schedule when I would travel with the president, those days are even longer, the international travel. So basically, as long as it took to always watch him and make sure that I didn't miss anything. And of course, I had backup. I couldn't do it all alone. So when I needed help, when I needed a rest, I had a support staff. I had four other photographers on staff, which we covered the First Lady, we covered the Vice President, and so whenever—
Between 5 of you?
Exactly.
Were there any times that were off limits?
Good question. Well, obviously there are a lot of private moments on his schedule. His private time in the residence, definitely off limits, and I had so much access that I literally had to kind of hold back just to respect that privacy, just because I was always around. I was definitely on his radar, but not actually in front of him, so I tried to respect that.
This photo here in the White House, Mr. and Mrs. Bush, or in the Oval Office, were you the only one in the room at this point along with him?
Yeah.
What's that like? Do they talk with you? Do they interact? Do they just ignore you?
They ignore me, actually, and that's what I wanted. I would go days where the president wouldn't even speak to me, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want him to acknowledge me every time I walked into a room, because I would change the environment. And I mean, I changed the environment because I was already present, but I didn't always want him to interact, and because I really wanted to document real moments and not change anything. So that was my role.
Eric Draper, you write that it was magical whenever President Bush and his father were together, and there's a lot of photos of the two Presidents Bush in this book.
Well, first of all, they looked so alike, which was really interesting. And anytime they were together, it was like history in the making. I mean, because you have two presidents together, father and son, the only second son of a president to become president, and it was always really interesting to photograph them together as a family, because they were so normal in lots of ways, other than the fact that they're two presidents together. And I really enjoyed documenting the family, the entire Bush family.
And did you get to know Mrs. Bush as well?
I did.
I want to ask about this photo on a very, very long couch. How did this one come about? Was this just happenstance?
This was inside Buckingham Palace. This was prior to departing for a black tie dinner hosted by the Queen. And the President and Mrs. Bush were staying there, and they were kind of walking around, and they were like kids. I mean, they really enjoyed themselves, and they said, "Well, Eric, come photograph us on this couch." And then they were playing around for me in this image, so it just really kind of created a fun light moment.
Where they both got on each end of the couch.
Right.
There's another photo here from 2001 where Mr. and Mrs. Bush are dancing.
Yeah, that was taken on January 20th, 2001. The President and Mrs. Bush were rehearsing before their very first inaugural ball backstage at the Reagan Center. And just, a quiet moment, just two of them. Obviously, there are lots of commotion going on behind me because everyone was preparing for the event to start. And they wanted to rehearse their dance, which they repeated literally a dozen times that night because of all the balls.
Now, in a lot of these photos, you do see Secret Service agents standing around. What was your relationship? Did they have final say over your access?
No. I love those guys. They were great to work with. They knew exactly what I needed to do, and of course, they were the priority. I mean, the president's safety was always ultimate. And if they were in the way, they would actually ask me. They would get out of the way of my images if they were, in the way. So they're wonderful people, and they helped me get my job done, especially with just kind of predicting the president's movements and knowing where he would go. Because part of the job was trying to stay a step ahead of the president in order to be in the right position at the right time.
Barney's in a lot of these photos.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we'll miss Barney. The president called Barney the son he never had. And as you can see, they really enjoyed each other. The president would play with them even during the day in the Oval Office, and Barney literally had the all-access pass to the White House. He can go anywhere.
Well, Eric Draper, I wanted to ask about this photo because the president's in the south lawn of the White House, and you can look straight out. And can people see him here where he is on the jogging path?
The White House is so unique because of the way it's laid out. And typically, when the president would walk onto the south lawn, you couldn't see anyone. It was almost like he was alone, like completely alone. But obviously, there are thousands of tourists outside, so it's a really interesting place and how it's laid out.
And here's another visit. I think this is Miss Beasley in this picture
here. Right. Miss Beasley was more affectionate, and she really enjoyed petting. The president would play with her a lot. And these moments these types of really light moments happen just literally seconds, and then it's back to the seriousness of the day or the meeting. And it was amazing how quickly things can transition from very intense and serious to light and funny to back to serious, and the whole day was like that.
Crawford, you write in here, and should say that in front row seat there's just a page or two of text introducing each segment, and you say here that I enjoyed the president's trips to Texas, more than the time we spent in Washington. Why?
You know, well, first of all, I'm more of